Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm a little better. I was stressed out about this shooting in Minneapolis. It was a nurse and it really hit home. But I want to talk about the crazy making nature of this whole situation, and including Renee Good, because everybody's fighting over it, right? We see one thing, they see another, and everybody's fighting, and everybody's trying to prove to the other side, like, this happened, and I saw this happen, and blah, 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 and the gun here, and no gun there. It is crazy making, okay? You cannot convince somebody that does not want to believe what they want, what you believe, like you can't convince somebody, especially when they must believe what they believe, because then their dreams are going to be shattered probably, and it's easy to do it with little things, but when it's something big like this and they see things with their own eyes and deep down inside they know they're wrong, but they convince themselves, you know, and it's just like they brainwashed themselves. And what makes it even crazier is that, they go out there and they make a statement and call, dragging their names in the mud and saying that they're terrorists and all these things, and they were trying to attack our officers and all of that. But, when you really look at it, you see with your own two eyes, right? Everybody says, I seen it with my own two eyes. You've seen it. It doesn't matter if you've got two eyes. If you are bought in to the dream and you're bought into a person like Trump, a regime like Trump, the whole, camaraderie of all of it, and the togetherness and the patriotism and, what they call patriotism, right? When you're all bought into that, you belong to a community. And it's hard to go against the community, especially when it has to do with your leader, right? It breaks your heart, and you will fool yourself into thinking that a situation is a certain way just because you don't want to feel the pain, And I've been there, I try to tell people certain things about somebody and they will not believe me. And I'm like, I've seen it with my own eyes, So like an example, I'll say an example, right? You know how sometimes people cheat on each other and there's a girl, she walks in on a guy, let's say, right? It could be the other way around, but let's just say. She walks in and, he could be stooping her, you know what I mean? And you walk in and you're just like, right? And he gets up and he's like, it's not what you think, it's not what you think. He starts with the gaslighting, right? And you just don't know what to do, right? And the threat of your world collapsing is a real threat too. You're just not going through the pain of what's happening, but you're going through the pain of the whole image just like collapsing on itself, And instead of saying you cheated on me and dealing with it, sometimes you will lie to yourself. And I've done it, not in that situation, but I've done it similar. Okay, I've been in a similar situation where I've seen evidence of cheating and I just ignored it just because I didn't want to lose my man at the time. And then, later on, when I find out all of the things, I'm like, I should have listened. I should have paid attention, But I totally ignore it because it's just better not to think about it, right? So the girl walks in and, he's stooping her, right? And then he gets up, and he puts, a towel around his waist. It's not what you think. Is that what you think? And she's just, dressing up, getting dressed and shit. And you're just like crying, right? And he goes, I accidentally fell in there. Or she just jumped and she was doing a somersault or something. Her clothes came off. She landed on me or some shit like that. I don't know. I'm not good at that shit. But anyway, so then, she's crying and he's hugging her and everything. The girl runs out, grabs her clothes and shit. You don't know what to do. So then he sits down with her. He says, I'm sorry, if he says sorry. It's not what you think, baby. She don't mean nothing. It's not like that. Don't believe it. I'll never do this to you again. Meanwhile, you did something, right? So if he says that, right? And you may be upset for a while and you just like try to go to sleep and ignore the situation because you're like traumatized, like your whole world is like falling down around you and you just like go into a freeze response or, fawning response or fight or flight, right? In my situation, I went into freeze mode and I just shut down. I was like a robot, you know. Um, and he held me at night. I love you. I'll never do anything like that to you again. Blah blah blah, and then the love bombing starts again. They start like romancing you and bring you flowers and shit. So you're just like, and when they do that, it's just easier just to give in because you're so hungry for the good times again that you just accept it when you wouldn't have before, you know. And people like Trump are like that, like he enjoyed having his fans all around him all the time, all the rallies, all the things. I mean, he was still doing rallies while he wasn't even president, like way before, his campaign for the next term. So he loves all the attention and all the love and all the things. So he doesn't want to lose his fans. So, he's going to say whatever he has to say to make them believe whatever it is that he wants them to believe. He has to do damage control all over the time, and they're very good at it. They're very good at manipulation. They're really good at, using a video like what happened with Renee Good or with Alex Preddy to make you dot your own eyes, and to question everybody's motives and all this thing. All of a sudden, you're a fucking detective, right? You're trying to figure shit out, but not really. Like, the people that believe what happened, they already know. They're in detective mode. They're trying to bring you the proof. They're doing the whole CSI shit. Here, this string goes to that string, and that string goes to that string, right? And look, and they could show you a freaking video in all these different angles, and you're just like, I don't believe it. No, or if you do believe it, right? Let's just say, oh, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. Or they just blame it on the victim. And they're all fighting in the comments. They're like, blah, 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 blah. They're saying bad things about the victims and all these things because, they're already trained to fight for Trump and to fight for the administration. They have a cause. So they're going to do whatever it is they have to do, even if it means attacking other people, verbally, physically, mentally, getting in the comments, bashing people, doxing people, shit like that, because they don't want it to end. It was such a high, being a part of MAGA and all the things, and they've done a lot of bad things probably to fuck up their relationships that, it's a lot to come back from, and I just want to tell you this. Look, don't worry. These kind of situations at the end, either we all fall apart, or we become better than ever. And then we start to get united again. Try not to get into arguments with people about this shit because, it's just not going to help. We're not freaking agents. We're not investigators, And when you find yourself being a PR person, trying to like make him look good again, like, oh, but he did this and what about that? And, it's always a what about this, They're already saying, oh, what about Ashley Babbitt? What about, Mr. Kirk? Can't think today. And they don't see that, not with Charlie Kirk, but they don't see that like something like with Alex Preddy or Renee Good, right? Where there could have been a mistake. They'll take something like the angle of the car to say she was gonna hit him. She's gonna hit him, and you can clearly see the tire like turned right. And if it was me, I would want to get out of there, But they'll just take that little thing and just run with it, They'll say, oh, but he had a gun, and they'll just run with it, And they'll eat up everything that they say about Alex, They'll say, oh, he came with a gun, he came at the agents and stuff like that. And they don't pay attention or they just ignore, the fact that he was trying to protect that lady, and he didn't take his gun out, and in a way, being a nurse, I could prove it to you. When people get, when you have a baby in the womb, usually like in the fetal position, right? And a lot of people sleep in the fetal position. It's just a calming thing, But in adults, it's not normal for people to be in a fetal position when they're awake. It's not. Usually it's when there's like emotional trauma or physical trauma, and they're trying to protect themselves, And he was in a protective position. He wasn't on his side, but he was on his knees, and he had his head like this because he got pepper sprayed to high heaven, and they're beating him with the guns, and they're kicking him and punching him and pushing him down and trying to grab his legs out from under him. But it's instinctual when you're in stress to put yourself in the fetal position, But you can't tell them that, They're gonna be like, but this and that and that. Just don't get in the conversation. That's all. Eventually, they will see, and if not privately, they'll see. They just won't let you know. They won't let you have the benefit of knowing that they agree, because they have to be right, And you can't do anything with that. You can't. Just believe your own eyes. Don't get into the crazy making stuff, And if you find yourself being in PR mode, where you're having to make excuses for the person, like I did, my boyfriend, you may be on the wrong side of history here. You really need to think. Because being in MAGA and in situations like that, you think you're right about everything. You think you're right about everything. Everybody else is wrong. And they want to make you doubt your own eyes, and it's tough. It's tough. But eventually, enough people will see, It's crazy making, believe me. I'm seeing videos and they're making me crazy. I'm like, but I know what I saw, but I just pray that cooler heads will prevail, and there are good people in the government, I'm hoping, that will hold them accountable for what they did. It is tough. Everybody's suffering. Nurses are suffering. I'm suffering for his family and for him. And I just pray he gets justice. But in the meantime, he's resting in peace in the hands of the Lord. He's a good man. And there are a lot of people hurting right now. And the last thing we need to do is try to solve a mystery. So think about it. I feel like I want to have hope. I want to have hope that eventually we're all going to come back together and we're going to be better than ever. I pray that all of the MAGA people will eventually just say, I'm Republican now, and just go back to regular life, Admit they were wrong, maybe even in quietly, in the room, and just say, you know what? I'm just going to be a Republican. That's a good way to say it, That way they don't have to admit they were wrong, But a lot of people with honor and integrity will admit they're wrong, and a lot of them have. Just look at Midas Touch. There's a channel on there where they go on there and they say that they're leaving MAGA. Just watch some of them, and then it'll give you some hope. Check it out. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. God bless. Bye.